to spend the next 3 hours of my life turning this mound of onions into something soft, golden brown, and uniquely sweet. Let me back up a little bit. 3 years ago, I released a video outlining how to caramelize onions using just onions, butter, and thyme, along with a splash of water here and there just to deglaze the pan. Using this method, it takes about an hour to get really deeply golden brown caramelized onions, and people were not happy about that. In the comments, there were lots of different suggestions as to how I could speed up the process, from everything to adding baking soda at the beginning to using America's Test Kitchen's technique by adding a bit of water to the beginning of the onions to speed up the process that way. So I thought I would put all of these different methods to the test and see which one yields the best results in the shortest period of time. So for the control, I'm going to do my typical method. Then I'm going to try the America's Test Kitchen method. And then finally, I'm going to caramelize some onions by adding some baking soda at the very beginning of the process. I'll use an equal amount by weight of sliced yellow onions, and I'm gonna do it all in a cast iron skillet. I decided over using any sugar to add to the onions because I wanted the onions themselves to caramelize instead of any additional sugar caramelizing instead. At the end, I'll have my husband portion them out into individual dishes, and then I will blind taste test to see which ones end up tasting the best. And if you're new here, I'm Maggie. This is No Frills Kitchen, where I teach you how to cook with confidence with nothing fancy required. So for all three methods, we're first going to need to prep our onions. To do this, cut a small section of the flower end off of the onion. Then set it down so the flat side is against the cutting board and cut the onion in half through the root end. Peel the onion and then use the end of your knife to remove the root from the half. Then set the flat side down on the cutting board and make thin radial cuts from pole to pole. Repeat this with the rest of your onions. To ensure the greatest integrity in this experiment, I'm also going to evenly divide the onions into thirds. And finally, before cooking, I'm also going to evenly weigh out the butter that I'm cooking the onions in. And that's all the prep done. Now, let's start with the traditional method. First, I'm going to melt the butter in a large cast iron skillet over medium heat. I like using cast iron because the dark color of the pan does aid in caramelization a bit quicker. You can also use a nonstick skillet though if that's all you have. Once the butter is melted, add your onions and a generous pinch of salt. Stir all of this to combine and then cover with a lid. Keep the onions covered until they've released a lot of their moisture and have reduced in size by about half. You can stir them occasionally if you want, but it's not necessary. Once you get to that stage, remove the lid and then cook them, stirring every so often until they begin to take on color. You don't need to hover over the stove and stir these constantly, just every few minutes. You'll see the onions gradually take on a darker and darker color. Once they're deeply golden brown and caramelized, they're done. This batch took almost exactly an hour from adding the onions to the skillet, so it's not a quick process, but it is relatively inactive, and I was able to do a few other things around the kitchen while I was caramelizing them, so I don't really think it's that much of a huge commitment, considering I'm not standing there stirring constantly for the entire hour. Okay, now it's on to the America's Test Kitchen method. I'm starting the same way as the first batch by melting the butter in the pan and then adding the onions. Along with a pinch of salt, I'm also going to pour in a bit of water. I'm going to wait for the water to start to steam and bubble up through the onions before putting a lid on the pan and walking away. You're supposed to wait until the water has evaporated, which took about 15 minutes here. Once the water has evaporated, remove the lid and using the back of your spoon or a spatula, smash the onions against the bottom and sides of the pan and then wait for 30 seconds. After 30 seconds, stir the onions, repeat the smashing, and then wait another 30 seconds. Keep repeating this step as the onions continue to take on color. One thing that I noticed with this method compared to the previous one is that this one is creating a bit more fond on the bottom of the pan. Just make sure to scrape it up and stir it back into the onions. Okay, so after about 25 minutes of the 30-second stirring increments, the onions are sticky and medium golden brown. Now's the time for the finishing touch on the onions. So I'm going to mix a small amount of baking soda into a little bit of water. Then I'm going to pour it over the onions and stir it in. Cook just until the water is dissolved and the onions are really deeply golden brown. This should only take a minute or two. And that's the ATK version done. It's definitely quicker than the previous method, but we'll see how that affects the flavor. Finally, now it's time for the baking soda method. I'm not super optimistic about this one, but we'll see how we go. We'll start the same way we've started with the previous versions, with adding butter and onions to the pan. Along with a generous pinch of salt, I'm also going to add in a small amount of baking soda. Then stir that in and cover. Okay, so very quickly, the onions have changed color to be very vibrant and unnatural looking. As I continue to cook these, the onions are also degrading really quickly and just turning soupy and really mushy. They've honestly lost all integrity and the color is interesting. The way this looks right now, I can't see this improving with more time, and I'm certain that the longer I keep these onions on the heat, they're just going to break down and degrade until it's just weird onion mush remaining. So I'm gonna call this here. Can't say I'm looking forward to trying this, but I will say it was the quickest method. I also don't think you can technically call these caramelized onions either, but we'll see how it all fares in the tasting. All right, so that is several hours later and 3 batches of caramelized onions, although I'm not sure if you could call this one caramelized onions. In hindsight, after making these batches, it's pretty obvious which one is which. So we decided not to have a little blind tasting because I was gonna be able to figure it out anyway, just by looking at it. So I'll go ahead and get started. Just upon like looking at the different methods, this one obviously is a lot drier. This is the traditional method. And the America's Test Kitchen version is a lot more jammy looking. The baking soda version is just upsetting. It's a really off color and it turned like this about 10 minutes into cooking and it upsets me a little bit and I'm not thrilled. Okay, so let me just jump in and taste it and I'll let you know my thoughts. So jumping in to the traditional version, yeah, like I said, it's a lot drier. The color's the same, but yeah, it's not quite as jammy as the America's Test Kitchen. And we'll go ahead and give it a little bite. Really good. Like the texture is really nice. There's a lot of like a good bite to it while still being soft. A lot of really complex caramelly flavors in there that also have a savory note, but that sweetness mixed into it. I would not complain if these were served to me on any sort of application. All right, I'm gonna jump in to the America's Test Kitchen one next. Yeah, like I said, it's just a little bit more jammy, a little bit softer. The consistency, it looks really nice. They look really nice, and it was done in a fraction of the time. I do have to say though, between these two, this one did take longer from start to finish, but a lot of the time is inactive, whereas this has a lot of active cooking time, especially once you remove the lid after you've added the water. So you have to spend every 30 seconds stirring and stirring, so you can't walk away, whereas this one I can walk away a little bit and do other things. Okay, so let's give this one a test. Yeah, so they taste softer. They're a little bit more, yeah, jammy, a little bit more moist. And they're definitely just sweeter. Then there's not as much of that complexity that I get in these. And I think that probably just comes with the time that these take, that it picks up more interesting flavors, but in general, like these are really, really good caramelized onions. I'm really happy with them. If you can see, this turned almost completely to mush. There are very few distinguishable onions left. I'm not gonna take a huge bite of this. There's some really vibrant green in here too. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. Honestly, flavor is not that bad, but the texture is all wrong. The flavor is kind of just sweet. There's not a lot of complexity there, but that texture is just like mush and it's not good. I'm gonna just chuck this one away and we're just not gonna be making caramelized onions with baking soda only, okay? That's just not something we're doing. All right. Let's do a side-by-side comparison between these two, and I will give you my final verdict. Traditional method, these are really good. It's just really, really good. All right, ATK. I think I know which is my favorite. This one's definitely sweeter, side-by-side with this one. I'm gonna have to say that the traditional method is my favorite way of making them. I know that it takes longer. In general, I think that it is probably worth it, and the fact that I actually can do other tasks while this is going on, I think is actually another benefit to the traditional version. So yeah, I think that's where I stand. I'd be really interested to know if you have ever done something like this or have tried different methods of caramelizing onions. And also, this is a new style of video that we're trying out, so let me know if you like it and if you want to see similar style of videos going forward. And make sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss my next videos. And I'll see you in the next one.